Well, if you like this kind of music, you'll notice two things about this video. The first is that this is a good band. The second, the people in it are barely recognizable. I'd like to talk to you today about the Mitrovica Rock School in Kosovo. 6 years ago, I moved to Mitrovica to help start up a rock music school. Mitrovica is a town in northern Kosovo and was already a hotbed of ethnic tensions in the late 1980s. This is when the nationalist movement started that led to the Balkan Wars in the 1990s that tore apart Yugoslavia. The last of these wars, the Kosovo conflict, left Mitrovica with a rigid ethnic divide, with its ethnic Serb population north of the Ibar River and ethnic Albanians in the south of the city. But Mitrovica has another history. Before the war, Mitrovica was a center for pop and rock music. Before the war, there were concerts and jam sessions every week. Musicians got together and formed bands, as musicians do, based on their musical taste and not their ethnic background. This wasn't particular to Mitrovica. Musicians all over Yugoslavia were getting together and forming bands, making music, organizing concerts. And when the war started, these ties weren't so easily broken. There's a story of a member of Croatian rock band Majka, who helped a Serbian musician friend who got stuck behind what were suddenly enemy lines, desert and escape to safety. One of my favorite stories is of the band Rim Tuti Tuki. Saying this on a stage is a little awkward because it's actually a dirty word in disguise, but never mind that. They were a supergroup comprised by members of some of former Yugoslavia's most famous bands. And they released an anti-war single in 1992 as the wars were starting to break out across Yugoslavia. But they were forbidden by authorities at the time to promote the single with a gig. So they hired this truck trailer and they rode it through Belgrade, giving an illegal live performance to enormous crowds. And they handed out t-shirts and badges and flyers with messages about the senselessness of war. Now, as you probably know, this is not the whole story. Music has played a reconciliatory role in the Balkan conflicts, but also a destructive one. Just think of the insidious influence of turbo folk, a genre created to promote nationalism and division. But the fact is that almost immediately after the wars, bands started to tour again throughout former Yugoslavia, picking up old connections despite the enormous damage that had been done to community relations. Hard to imagine for people of any other profession, right? So, back to Mitrovica. When Musicians Without Borders first arrived in Mitrovica, we were asked to help revive the city's rock tradition. Because this tradition had been an inclusive one, we agreed with our local partners that bringing back rock music also meant reconnecting the city's now divided youth. The plan was to start up a rock school for youth from both sides of the city. We found a location, the basement of the cultural center, which is immediately next to the main bridge, which connects or divides the two sides. And we hoped that youth from the two sides would come there for music lessons. But this was naive. People in Mitrovica don't cross the bridge, especially not for something like music lessons. So in 2008, we decided to invite young musicians from the two sides to travel together to Skopje, which is in neighboring Macedonia and quite close, for what we called then a rock school in exile. And this became our first Skopje summer school. Young musicians from North and South Mitrovica got on a bus together and traveled to Skopje, and in Skopje they formed mixed bands. And they worked together all week with Mitrovica musicians and international rock musicians towards a big outdoor concert. Now, when the kids came back to Mitrovica, they demanded a school in their own town. And having learned that we couldn't do it the way that we wanted to do it, we decided to restructure the project in a way that it worked from 2 separate locations in Mitrovica, one on each side, but where we brought the kids together for regular summer schools and training weeks and tours. And we used the internet. The school wouldn't work without Facebook and YouTube and Skype. So working in a place where people can't even meet, trying to promote interethnic relations is tricky. I came to realize that people on the 2 sides of Mitrovica really don't know anything about each other. Younger generations are growing up without any contact with the other side, and they're being fed the prejudices of their parents. The reality of this came home to me when a young girl, a singer-songwriter from North Mitrovica, wrote lyrics for her ethnically mixed band. And she wrote that we are suffering for their wrongs. When we asked her about it, she didn't think that there was anything wrong with saying this, because surely they also know that this is the truth. Luckily, one of her fellow students was around to explain that not everybody has the same take on history. During the same period, a young guy from the other side confided in us that he feared getting beat up when he met the other members of his mixed band. It hadn't occurred to him that normal people, musicians, would be traveling from both sides to Skopje, because nobody ever talked about the normal people on the other side. But I've seen time and again that no matter how abnormal the situation people are coming from, when placed in a band together, young people are going to grab the chance for normal interaction. The next step is connection, and often this is followed by friendship. One year, we had a young musician, a guitarist from North Mitrovica, who came to one of our mixed summer schools. His friends back home were flirting with ultranationalism and neo-Nazism. And the first couple of days, he flat out refused to talk to anybody who wasn't a Serb, including the Dutch musicians who were working as trainers. But I could see him kind of gravitating more and more towards this kid from the south side, who was an excellent guitarist. And by the 3rd day, we saw them showing each other riffs. And by the end of the week, they were friends. And they're still friends. And the Serb kid is still with the school, and now he's a member of one of our ethnically mixed bands. Now, coming from the outside, it's impossible for me to understand what it means to grow up in Mitrovica. And it's a little awkward for me to stand here talking about it as if I have the right to speak as an insider. But I've lived in the region for 6 years, and 2 of those in Mitrovica. And one thing that I have come to understand is just how suffocating it can be, and how important it is for young people to feel that the doors to the world are open. I remarked once on a friendship that had been formed between a girl who I had thought was a political hardliner with a girl from the other side. My Serb colleague commented then to me that this kind of experience is the only chance that these kids get to experiment with a different kind of life. Now, as you can probably imagine, a lot of NGOs have tried to connect the people of Mitrovica. The big difference between these kinds of projects and the rock school approach is that we don't talk about it, we just do it, or rather, we let the music do it. When you bring people together to reconcile their differences by talking about them, you're still keeping the focus on ethnic identity. No matter how the conversation goes, everyone in the room will constantly be aware of the fact that they're really there together in order to promote interethnic dialogue. Fun, yeah. But when you place 2 people in a band together, then you suddenly have Jelena the singer with Dren the guitarist writing this amazing new song that has nothing to do with the political situation. They've transcended it. Like the professional ex-U rock musicians who got back on stage together after the war, so too the students of the Mitrovica Rock School. They stand out in a crowd, and they're not afraid to be different. and they stand on a stage and they command the respect of their generation. Musicians, especially rock musicians, have been social change makers over history and across the globe. So little wonder that it works in Mitrovica too, right? So what are the lessons of the Mitrovica Rock School that can maybe contribute to some other efforts at reconciliation in the region? First, the main one I think is really simple, and it's don't force it. What we do is we create a platform for people to meet through music. That's it, and that's enough. Any musician who has anything to offer in a band is going to be interesting to the other band members. These young people, they connect over musical taste or style or proficiency or personality. If you want to help normalize things, you have to act normally. It's not normal to treat people as members of their ethnic group. It's normal to treat them as individuals with their own individual talents and ambitions. And if you can, to support them in developing those talents. But you have to trust people to make connections for themselves. Now, an interesting, or actually important part for us of this aspect is our cooperation with the Fontes Rock Academy in the Netherlands. They are a bachelor-level music academy in pop and rock music. And they've supported the project with teacher training, and their students work directly with our bands. Now, being a music school, their focus is entirely on the musical and didactic development of the Mitrovica Rock School. This positions the Mitrovica Rock School as a credible institution in the region, but equally importantly, the fact that their students, these Dutch young people, usually don't know who is what, makes it that much more natural for our students to work in mixed bands. Something that I have found incredibly important, especially in a place like Mitrovica where literally everything is political, is to keep politics out of it and really keep them out. You can't ask young people to check their politics at the door if you have a secret political agenda. They will sniff it out. We connect people in Mitrovica because it's normal and natural for people in one city to be working together, but we're not trying to further the interest of one ethnic group over the other. There are enough people doing that, and we think these kids really deserve better. Something that I've struggled with personally is something that can be a little bit tricky because it's hard enough to find good people, and also anybody would agree with me that we should be recruiting on the basis of talent and not ethnicity. But at the same time, it's been really important for us to find a neutral working form. A lot of mistakes are made in reconciliation projects by internationals like myself because we don't understand the subtleties of the situation. And a lot of mistakes are also made by locals because they don't have enough distance from the situation to stand above it. At the Rock School, we've always had a core management team of one local from each side, plus one international, supporting a mixed team of local teachers. So we keep each other in balance. You have to face the fact that you're not going to change anything by preaching to the choir. You have to work with real people. Now, this sounds easy, I know, but the implications have been anything but easy. It meant that we had to work from 2 locations in Mitrovica, bringing criticism that we were actually reinforcing the divide rather than bridging it. And it meant that we had to open our doors to everybody, not just the people who already agree with what we think. So that includes ultranationalists and neo-Nazis and people of any political color, because we believe that a solution to an impasse like the one in Mitrovica is not going to come by just involving the people who already think that things should be different. You need to involve all kinds of people. And it takes time, but we have had some small success stories with these people too. It's really difficult to keep your prejudice when you start working with people on the other side. Now, the other thing, working from 2 locations, this is something that we have to explain a lot, and there are a lot of misunderstandings about it. I will try to explain it the way I see it. Basically, there are 2 levels of problems, if you want to oversimplify it. The first is the kids' own prejudice and their unwillingness to work together. Now, in the beginning, this was all that we were focusing on. But when we started to achieve results and we saw that kids actually wanted to come together because they had made friends with the other side or they had a band that included members from the other side, we ran into a second problem. And this is the pressure from their communities not to interact. Now, at this moment, it is simply not safe for the students from the Mitrovica Rock School to take lessons in a single location. We are trying to change what we can with gentle pushing and pulling, but we're not willing to push it to the point where we're actually endangering our young students or teachers, or even make them severely uncomfortable. A Dutch reporter once accused us of giving into terrorism because we turned down his request for an interview. Now, I find this arrogance beyond comprehension, really. To require of teenagers on the other side of Europe that they exhibit the kind of bravery that you will never be asked to show in the face of dangers that you, let's face it, really don't understand, and at 0 risk to yourself. We've had to learn to say no to the press. When the Architects, the band that you saw at the beginning, fell apart, we realized that we were to blame. We had thought that we needed the publicity in order to secure the funding for the school or get bookings for the bands. So we didn't give the kids enough protection from reporters. Well, reporters are, of course, after their own story, and once that's done, they're not so interested in the well-being of the kids or the school or whatever. After that happened, we had a complete press ban for over a year. And since then, we've slightly reopened the doors to the press, but we're incredibly careful and we're highly selective. We think that 1 or 2 media reports per year is enough to get the message out, and in any case, the most important thing is for the kids to know that our focus is on them and their music. What I have found the hardest thing, and what definitely takes the hardest work, is to go slow and to stick around and not to expect quick results. People in Mitrovica are divided because thousands of people invested their energy plus millions and millions of euros into the conflict over several generations. It really doesn't make sense to expect a 1-week summer camp to make a big difference, unless, of course, it's part of a bigger program. Now, any NGO will tell you that they would love to have long-term projects, but they can't afford it because that's not how the funding is structured. And most donors consider a 1-year grant long-term. It is also really true that it is much more difficult to design your own project and then keep developing it year after year. But I think that it's the only thing that works, and that's kind of the point, isn't it? Think about it. Every successful venture in non-conflict countries is long-term. So why would these so-called hit-and-run projects be the answer to the complicated issues in post-conflict regions? This approach is soft and it's slow and it's subtle, but it keeps it real and it works. And there is nothing soft or subtle or slow about our bands, which I think speak for themselves. I'm going to leave you now with the Architects, who are, by the way, back together again and still rocking hard. Enjoy.